Today we'll be solving quadratic equations using the square root. So when we solve quadratic equations, we have different ways to refer to the solutions. We think of the acronym ROCKS: roots, zeros, x-intercepts, and solutions. When we graphed, we found the x-intercepts, or the zero of the function. Today we'll be taking the square root, so we will be finding the roots of the function. But all these terms are synonymous. We're trying to find solutions to the quadratic equation. So to begin with, taking the square root and finding the solutions or the roots is not a difficult process. What is difficult sometimes is determining when to use that method. So let's take a look at a few different types of quadratic equations so we can distinguish when we need to use the square root. We're going to take the square root. Here we have a binomial. It has a quadratic term, an x squared, and a constant. There is no linear term. That would be a good candidate for the square root. So what we would do here, we're just going to isolate the x as we always do. X squared equals 9, and then we take the square root. X equals plus or minus 3. So we will write both roots, the positive and the negative root, when we take the square root. Anytime you're using an equation, you're going to list both positive and negative. So that, again, was a binomial with no linear term. That's when we took the square root. Our next example has a quadratic term and a linear term. So even though it's a binomial, we don't want to take a square root. We want to factor the x's here. So we're going to factor out the x. And then we're going to learn that we're going to take each factor, this is a factor, and set that one to 0, and set the other one to 0. Using the zero product property, we're going to find out here that x is 0 and x is negative 6. So we have two solutions there. Here our solutions are negative 3 and 3. All right, and here's another type of quadratic that we'll solve. We have a quadratic term, a linear term, and a constant term. So one method to do that is to factor it. And then I'm going to set each factor to 0. And my solutions are negative 2 and negative 3. So again, today we'll be using the square root, but we just want to make sure that we don't have a linear term, because that's not when we take the square root. When we do not have a linear term, but we have a quadratic term. Let's go ahead and try number 1. Try number 2. Number 2, we have no solution. You can't take the square root of a negative number. Try number 3. Try number 4. Okay, let's try 7. Let's divide first.